Hi, it's Sandy Wiley. Welcome to my mental health channel, where I try to debunk the stigma around mental illness. I talk about my own borderline personality disorder, among many other disorders like schizophrenia, bipolar, narcissism. I talk about my 20 years in therapy and my unethical therapists. So if you're new to this channel, welcome. If you like what you see, give it a thumbs up, because that helps. And stick around, take a chance, and join. It's free. Absolutely free. So, what I'm going to talk about today in this video is, can borderlines, people like me who have borderline personality disorder, can they have long and healthy, stable relationships? Now, I want to erase the stigma that borderlines can't have healthy, stable relationships, because if you look that up, one of the symptoms of borderline personality disorder is that they don't have stable relationships. And I want to debunk that myth, because I'm not just a a self-acclaimed borderline. I have been diagnosed as having borderline personality disorder by 2 psychologists. So I'm not just diagnosing myself. I think a couple of subscribers have that misconception. This is I am not. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention is I am not a therapist. I do not have a degree in psychology. So please do not come on my channel looking for professional mental health, because I can't give it to you. I'm only here as a patient, all right? Now, I want to debunk the myth that borderline personalities can't have long, healthy, stable relationships, because we can. Now, my last couple of videos, I go on and I say how, I don't have any friends. So then I'm thinking, well, if I go and say I don't have any friends, people are going to say, see, it just proves it. She's a borderline. She can't keep relationships. But I've been married for 36 years to the same man. 36. I met him when I was 18 years old. I'm now 58. That's 40 years, people. Do the math. 40. Met him at 18. I'm 58, because we dated several years before we got married. That's 40 years. So don't tell me, or anyone who says, it's written. It's written in all the literature. I'm not making this up. Go Google it. Google it yourself and see. That's one of the symptoms. That's one of the classic symptoms, that borderlines can't have healthy, stable, long-term relationships. Yes, we can. What do you call 40 years, baby? 40. That's very, in my eyes, what's the longest relationship you've had with anyone? Has it even come close to 40 years? 40. 40. Okay? So, yes, we can. And I just want to erase this stigma altogether. Like with my dad, schizophrenia, same thing. They'll tell you they can't have stable relationships. My dad was a great dad, okay? He had a mental illness, but he really listened to me. He cared about me, even though he was fighting a crippling illness that made him psychotic, delusional, hallucinating, and he was, in and out of mental hospitals. My dad was a great dad. We had, a great connection. So he was a good parent. Unlike my mother, he never raised his voice. She screamed at me all the time. He never swore. She swore at me and called me. He never called me any names, like stupid, slut, dumb, like my mother. Not one name. He never raised his hand to me. My mother beat me to a pulp. So this was a person who had severe paranoid schizophrenia. Okay? So let's just get rid of the stigma that if you have mental illness, you cannot have good, strong, stable, long-term relationships. Now, look at my sons, 28 and 26. I still have good, solid relationships with both of them. I know people. I had a friend, Janice. She had two beautiful daughters. And she didn't even go to one of their weddings. She wanted nothing to do with her daughters. Nothing. They were adults. They had, one bought a house, and she invited Janice over. And you know what she said to me? She just wants to brag. This is what she said about her daughter to me. She wants to brag because she bought a house and I never bought a house, because she's getting married and I'm divorced. Because she got a bachelor degree and I never went to college. She just wants to rub it in my face. I mean, can you believe this? And Janice was not borderline. I just want to set the record straight. My ex-friend Janice did not have borderline personality disorder. And she had nothing to do with her children. I know other people, some I'm friendly with on Facebook, and I don't want to say their names because I'm friendly with them. That was my ex-friend Janice. That have nothing to do with their adult children. So I'm always going to be part of my children's life. One is severely handicapped. He has traumatic brain injury. I'm sure you know that by now by listening to all my other videos. But the other one's studying to be a doctor. And I'm always going to maintain, because they're, I brought them into this world. I can't think why, I would ever not want to have a close relationship with them up until the day I die. See? So, and that's like 28, 26 years right there. So it's not true that we can't have. What is true is that when we start any relationship, this is what I had trouble with my girlfriends. I didn't set any defined boundaries. In fact, I had no boundaries. I let people walk all over me, which is totally different. I have very, very high boundaries now, but back before now, I had no boundaries. So I would say to someone who has trouble, if you're borderline or not, in relationships, is to set your standards high. Have those boundaries. And I mean, I would make friends with people just because, I felt bad for them. Can you imagine that? I would make friends with them. I had this friend, Jimmy. He had traumatic brain injury. He was in a wheelchair. He got run over by a car when he was an alcoholic. Jimmy is an alcoholic. And he was drunk and riding a bike. So he didn't watch where he was going, and he got run over by a car. As a result of that injury, he had traumatic brain injury. And he was like all one side of his body was paralyzed. He couldn't use it. He couldn't use his arm, his hand, his legs. He was in a wheelchair. He could use the other side, but he couldn't walk because you need both legs to walk. And, I had him over my house. I've been over his house. I helped cut his nails even because he couldn't cut his nails because he couldn't use his hand. It'd be like, one side of his body was all paralyzed from the accident. And I befriended him. And I'd see him. He said, "Oh, give me a kiss. Give me a hug." And I'd kiss him and give him a hug because I felt bad for him because, no one wanted to pay attention to him because he talked kind of funny because he had speech impediment because of his brain injury. I have a son with traumatic brain injury. So I could have compassion for someone like that. And I befriended him, and he certainly took advantage of that. I mean, we weren't sexual or anything. We were just platonic. But, there again, I didn't have my high boundaries up and I let people walk all over me. So I think the first thing you need to do is to make your, those boundaries clear. So people like know where you stand. See, that's where boundaries define us. This is my space. This is what separates me as a person from you as a person, individual. That's your space. And, know what you will allow in a relationship and know what you won't. Like with Janice, I let her walk all over me. Again, I made friends with her because I felt sorry for her. Janice never had anything to do with me in high school. This is the one that didn't want nothing to do with her daughters. We met up at a high school reunion. There's a bunch of girls who went to this restaurant for, I forget, it was a high school reunion. I don't know what number it was, the 10th, the 15th, the 20th. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I can't remember. It must have been like 2011 or 12, something like that. Or maybe earlier. And I found out that Janice had this, needed to get her bladder out because she had this illness that gave her tumors. They were benign tumors, but she got this tumor. Or she'd get them on her legs. She'd get tumors in different places of her body. She had some sort of illness that predisposed her to tumors. So she got this huge tumor on her bladder, and the doctor said she needed to get her bladder out. And so, she'd have to wear a bag for her urine, just like people who have to wear a bag. I don't want to get into, the medical stuff. If they have colon cancer and they have their colon removed, then they need a bag for their, you see what I'm saying? But she needed a bag because she did not have a bladder, which gave her all these urinary tract infections because she didn't have a bladder. And she was in the hospital all the time. And of course, she got my number and started, calling me and crying on the phone about it all, and never wanted anything to do with me in high school. But now that she didn't have her bladder and she was in the hospital, was very sick, in and out of the hospital with urinary tract infections, had to have a bag for her urine because she had no bladder. Now she wanted me as a friend. See how used I was? And I had such empathy, I felt so bad, that I befriended her. And, I went to the hospital and visited her. Then she had an alcohol problem too. She wants to meet up with me and go to the bars in the afternoon. Now, this is where I should have never agreed to this, because her other friends worked. I didn't work. So I was free in the afternoon. They weren't. She didn't like to drive at nights. We drove halfway between she lived in Norwood, halfway between Norwood and Rosendale in Dedham, which isn't too far from me, like maybe 10 or 15 minutes. It isn't too bad. And we meet at restaurant bars. We'd sit at the bar, always at a dark bar, and drink 2 cocktails, and then I drive home. So, which isn't good either, because I've gotten into problems in the past with drunk driving. But she wanted to tie one on and have someone listen to all her problems. And what better person than me? Because I'm home. I can visit her during the day at the hospital. I can listen to her 24, during the day. Her other friends are working, so they can't spend hours on the phone listening to her. I felt really bad for her. It's not really a good reason to become friends with someone, because you feel sorry for them. But, I felt sorry, and, I offered myself, and, she walked all over me, using me, And it wasn't a good idea for me to be hitting the bars at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and then going back and driving home from the bars. I should have, been very clear that, I didn't want to do that. That I don't, because that's drinking and driving. If you if I drive to a bar and have a couple of cocktails, it wasn't even wine. It was like, I don't know, a couple of cocktails. We'd have blue Hawaiians or something. Like, she likes fruity drinks like me. We have some fruity cocktails. But still, two cocktails and then, driving back. That's and she one time she got so drunk she couldn't drive back. And she had to call her boyfriend. But the thing is, I didn't set the boundaries. And the same thing with Holly. I didn't set boundaries, and I let her walk all over me. What I'm trying to say is, you need to set boundaries and make them very, very clear. In order to have long-term stable friendships, because if you don't do that, it's not going to really work out. And I think that with my sons and my husband, and it goes both ways too. The other person has to set boundaries with you. What is allowable, and what really isn't okay. And if they don't accept that, or you don't accept that with them, and then bye, sayonara. So I think that's important. If you have a relationship with a borderline, that you have to set clear boundaries, okay? And you have to stick to those boundaries, and don't let your feelings of feeling bad for the person, your compassion, your empathy get in the way of that, like it did with me. You have to stick with those boundaries. Having a relationship with a borderline means you need to have clear, consistent boundaries with them. You need to stick with those boundaries. You need to tell whoever the person is in your life who has borderline personality disorder that no, it's not okay to do this. It's not okay to do that. Like, what you will tolerate and what you won't tolerate. You need to, and I think that's important in every relationship, not just with the borderline. I think that's important in every relationship, is to set up those clear boundaries, and which I really didn't. I thought in the beginning that it was all right as far as meeting her, because she would drive from Norwood and I would drive from Rosendale, and we meet somewhere like in Dedham, like in between where we both lived. So it wasn't like she was driving all the way over to see me, or I was driving all the way over to see her. So it felt like that was fair. But I shouldn't have been going to a bar with her, because, yeah, I mean, I could have had lunch with her without having cocktails. But but she always wanted to go to the bar. You know what I mean? She wouldn't want to go to, I don't know, Panera Bread or something, you know what I mean? A place that doesn't have cocktails. She always picked a restaurant, and she always picked sitting at the bar all the time, always sitting at the bar. So, and she always ordered drinks. Let me tell you, if you're at a bar with me and you're ordering drinks, I'm going to order with you. Okay? It's just like, I mean, now, or if you have dessert, I'm going to get dessert too. I'm just like that, But what I'm trying to say here is that I didn't set the boundaries. I should have never really became friends with her, because, I shouldn't have been friends with someone because I feel bad for them, I felt really bad for her. She'd call and she'd cry on the phone, and I'm a compassionate person, so, I felt bad. But see, that's not a reason to have a friend, because you feel sorry for them. That's not reason at all, I know they say a friend in need is a friend indeed, but I disagree with that. A friend in need is a friend who's going to walk all over you. That's how I see it now. If I have to pick, if I was going to have a friendship nowadays, I'd make sure the person doesn't need anything from me. That I'm not having a friendship out of pity or sorrow for that person, because I feel bad for that person. And, I would just want it to be because we both like each other. It's mutual. I don't need anything from her, and she doesn't need anything from me. And it's like a mutually satisfying, and it's someone who's going to enrich my life. Not going to meet at a bar in the afternoon and start drinking cocktails. Or call me up crying and crying. I'm not saying that friends can't call you up and, and be upset. But if that's how the relationship starts out, you see what I'm saying? The difference? If you've been friends with someone and something happened to them and they call you up and they're crying and they talk to you about their problem, that's fine. But I'm saying you don't start a relationship like that. At least I don't think it's a good idea to, right? I don't think it's a good idea to start a relationship like that where someone is that needy, I'm talking from experience. I don't think it's a good idea. But so set those boundaries. Have high standards. And you can, if you do that, if you set boundaries, if both people, set boundaries with the person, have high standards, if the person will, you can have a healthy relationship with a borderline because they just need clear, consistent boundaries, all right? And you can't feel sorry, Don't feel sorry for them. Have consistent, clear boundaries with them. And stick with it, Stick with it. If they're not going to respect your boundaries, then you know what? That's it. That's it. Then don't stay in a relationship like that, But I just want to come on and tell you, like, I've had long-term relationships, but I also have had long-term relationships where I let people walk all over me, like my friend Holly for 12 years. And, I got to the point in my life with not just Holly, other people like Jim and Dick, my therapist, the one I had a 2-year affair with. I got to the point in my life that I don't want to take any more crap, So it wasn't just my best friend Holly, it was other people too, that I just cut out because I was through with it, And going forward, I don't let anyone new in my life unless they respect my boundaries, and I'm going to respect theirs too. And certainly not someone in need or someone who I feel sorry for, because I'm very prone to that. But I think that if you do that, keep those boundaries, and, be concise about it, and that you can have a healthy relationship with a borderline. They're just afraid of being abandoned. They're afraid of getting hurt again, And I think it's going to take time. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy. It'll take time. But look at my husband and me, 40 years together, So, in the beginning, I didn't trust him because, it took me a long time to establish that. But we're still together, right? So, yeah, I think that I'm living proof that you can have a long-term relationship if you're a borderline. So,